So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We're thrilled to have you, and we're really excited to talk about the Art Conservation Program at Queen's and answer any of the questions that you may have. I'm Alison Murray. I'm the graduate coordinator, and I teach the science component of the program. Also joining me are Stephanie Killen, the graduate assistant in the program, and some of you may have already been in touch with Stephanie. I also have two students. First, Rose Aymon Gagnon, who is a second year painting student who is on her internship, her summer internship, and will graduate at the end of the summer. And Jonah Halili, who is also a second year student in the research stream, and he's finishing his science thesis in the summer. So you'll hear from both Jonah and Rose. And also Stephanie will be able to help answer questions at the end as well. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A section. We'll wait till the end of the presentation to answer these questions. And we are recording the webinar so that we can use it to help other prospective students. Stephanie will be following up with an email to make sure all your questions have been answered. And you may think of other questions as well after the webinar has finished. We hope to give you in this presentation a sense of what the art conservation field is like. It's really a field where art meets science. A conservation professional has to use their hands, the knowledge of materials, the history and technology of cultural heritage, and also an understanding of how science relates to the conservation of these materials. This program, the Master of Art Conservation Program at Queen's, is the only Masters in Conservation in Canada. So let me just go to the second one. We hope that you'll learn more about art conservation from this lecture. I know some of you may already be well versed in the field and how to get into it, but for some of you, you're just beginning and you may have just heard of this area, this field of art conservation. So we know that you all have different levels of understanding, and we hope that the presentation will be informative for everyone. So we're going to cover what is art conservation, how to become a conservator, art conservation at Queen's, the student profile. So Jonah and Rose will talk about their backgrounds and how they got into the field and other aspects of the program. We'll also talk about how to apply. And then finally, we'll talk about different job opportunities that our students have had in the recent past. And then we'll have a question and answer period. So again, thank you all for joining. Now, so first, I want to talk to you about what art conservation is. So we talk about conservation being the practice of safeguarding cultural heritage. And safeguarding could include things like maintaining, repairing, and restoring cultural heritage materials. And these materials or objects could be artworks, so paintings on different supports, artifacts, so for example, from archaeological digs, from costumes, so textiles. It could be paper-based objects, for example, photographs or fine arts, books, and then on archival records. So conservation, when we talk about conservation, can cover a wide range of types of materials. And then the work itself can include examination and research on these different materials, materials analysis. So it could be simple techniques or more advanced techniques where you would work with scientists. Documentation is really important in the field to document, for example, before treatment and after treatment. The treatment itself, where works of art are being treated to slow down deterioration, and then preventive conservation as well, where we care about the environment that works of art are in, for example, the temperature and relative humidity, and we try and safeguard materials to slow down their degradation. So at Queen's, we have 4 specializations. We have the artifacts stream, so that would include archaeological and ethnographic objects, sculptures made of stone or metal, textiles, organic materials, so basketry, so wide range of materials. Paintings is the second specialization. So it could be on canvas support or panel support and wall paintings. That could also include modern and contemporary materials and paintings as well. And then finally, the third of the treatment streams is paper. So that's works of art on paper, archival materials, photographs, and new media. So those three are really for learning how to be a hands-on conservator. We also have a field in the program for conservation science. And so that would be for people who have a background in science or engineering. And conservation science, a lot of the people who work in that area might look at analyzing materials, understanding their degradation, and also developing treatments with conservators. So those are different specializations we have. And we consider the first three are more of, they're in a lab a lot, learning how to be conservators. And then we also have conservation science is also a more of a research base. So it's coursework and then also a thesis. We also have a program for students who have already had 5 years of conservation experience, who may not have a master's degree in conservation. And that also is a research-based program where they would take 4 courses and a thesis, and that's a year-long program. So I want to talk a little bit about how you can become a conservator. And so before the program, you would, for example, take your undergraduate degree, and that might be in art history or fine arts or the sciences, and you are gaining skills in those different areas. It can be also that you would also be able to gain knowledge about conservation. So for example, you could take a tour of a conservation lab or talk to people in the profession. It would be wonderful to even have a pre-program experience where you're actually working in a lab and observing what conservators do and helping them with that work. That sometimes is possible. And we also think it's wonderful if people are able to read more about conservation, whether or not it's information they might find on web pages belonging to different museums or organizations. It could be reading relevant books or articles. And then also some educational institutions have courses in conservation where you can learn more. So there are a variety of ways where you can learn more about the field. And certainly you want to, if you're considering this, you want to, attend webinars like this as well, where you get to learn about this field as well. So when you are, so the education in Canada is first you get an undergraduate, like a BA or a bachelor's in science or in engineering. Sometimes there are undergraduate degrees offered in art conservation in Europe and in the US. But in Canada, the usual route is to get an undergraduate degree in another field and then come and do a master's degree in art conservation, where you, as Queen's, choose, if you're interested in treatment, one of the 3 streams. And if you're interested in the science, the conservation field, you would also have an undergraduate degree, as I said before, in engineering or in sciences. You would then, as I said, get a master's degree in art conservation. And there are, for people who are interested, opportunities for getting your PhD or your doctoral degree after that as well. But it's, to be a conservator, you need to have usually a master's degree. You don't need to get a PhD or a doctoral degree. And so it's great. I hope some of you maybe maybe have already finished your undergraduate degree, but it's great also to reach out and be able to be talking to people who are in high school or the early years of an undergraduate degree, because there are prerequisites for the program and in studio art and chemistry, for example. And so it's nice to be able to get those, for example, when you're still in your undergraduate degree, but there are many ways that you can get those prerequisites afterwards as well. So once you've finished and obtained your master's in art conservation, what you would do then is your work would be to find project-based or contract positions, fellowships, and this might mean that you might have to go to different cities at the beginning, be willing to move around and have these exciting opportunities, and then after a little while get professional positions. So we have some numbers and some lists of where our graduates are that you might be interested in. So I think, let's see, the next slide. I'm going to pass this over to Rose.
Hi. So as a reminder, my name is Rose and I'm in the treatment stream in the painting section. So I'm about to talk to you about prerequisites and my personal experience as a Quebec French Canadian coming into the program. So as a reminder, Queen's University offers a master of 2 years, which is shorter than most American or European conservation programs. Most of them vary between 3 to 5 years, but you still have the same quality of teaching, the same courses, the same confidence and skills to get you on the field, even with 2 years. The program is divided by courses, treatment labs. As you can see on the picture, this is a lab, my lab. You also have summer internships. So the 2 year is a full 2 years. Your summers will be taken by internships of 3 months at different institutions. And finally, a research component. So it's a master's thesis that is not as complicated or complex as the conservation science, but it's a great opportunity to do research and explore something you're curious about or to solve a problem you've encountered during your program. So for the prerequisites, you may have seen this, this paragraph because it's on the Queen's website. So you must have a 4-year honors bachelor's degree in humanities, sciences, or engineering with minimum B+ average or equivalent, depending where you're coming from. You also must have, as mentioned, 1 full year of post-secondary course in fine art studio or workshop practice, 3 terms of chemistry at university level, including at least 1 term of organic chemistry. And all courses are preferably with a lab component, which would be really useful since you'll be often in lab during your master at Queen's. If you're coming from a background in humanities, you must have 5 full year courses in art history, ethnology, archaeology, or equivalent. And if you're coming from a more scientific background, you must have 2 full year courses in art history, ethnology, archaeology, or equivalent. Next slide, please. So that's me. So as I mentioned, I'm coming from Quebec City, Quebec, Canada. And how it's divided is a bit different. We have this thing called Cégep, which is at the junction of high school and college. And so that's where I obtained an international baccalaureate in history. And then I moved on to my undergrad, which is a 3-year undergrad in Quebec, where I did it at Université Laval. And I got a bachelor in art history. And I also studied archaeology. So during my study in archaeology, I did 1 year and I had the opportunity to do a 1-month archaeological dig in Rimouski, which is in Quebec. And I think that's where I got my first taste of conservation, because after you extracted the objects from the soil, you had this portion where you go in lab and minimally treat the objects. So classify them by metals, by plastics, if you have some by seeds, by bones, and what types of cleaning you can do now, or how to store them to send them to labs. So that's where I got my first taste of conservation. And I also worked in a museum located on a historical site in the 1600s. So in Canada, 1600s is like the beginning of the nation. I worked as a guide and then transitioned as a museum technician when I learned that I wanted to go in conservation. And it really helped me to understand many aspects of preventive conservation. So as I mentioned before, storage, and also how to take care of your collection, the different types, how to prevent insects from getting inside your museum, etc. Next slide, please. So my experience at Queen's, the first year is mainly getting all your basics done. So you will have many classes with all the other students in the stream, so you're not isolated in your painting, artifacts, or paper, or conservation science stream. You're all together. And you learn about ethics, preventive conservation, photography, and stream-specific treatment. For painting, since I'm in painting, I did easel paintings, panel paintings, modern, and contemporary art. You also have to take elective courses that allow you to explore material outside of your own stream. So for example, I took 2 classes, one in artifacts, which was the conservation of organic objects. So I studied more about wood, leather, bone, ivory, etc. And I also decided to take a course in paper, which was works of art on paper. So you can really complete your knowledge, or if you're interested in both paintings, but polychromy on wood, you can also get this small bit of knowledge in another class with all our beautiful and wonderful teachers. Personal program highlights. My internships for me is where I got the most confidence. And when you first start your year, you're a bit anxious sometimes. I come from a background in humanities, and I didn't expect to have that many lab components. So science is really important. And also just getting the skill set, building your skill set will take some time. And in the internships, you have this wonderful opportunity to meet new people, new institutions, or private practices, and develop your skills and go for it. So my first internship, I went to the Canadian Conservation Institute, or CCI, which is located in Ottawa. And I'm currently in my second year internship at the Midwest Art Conservation Center, or MAC, in Minneapolis. So I would say the internship is like one of the biggest things in my personal experience. We also have the ANACPIC, which is, okay, ANACPIC is, Association of North American Graduate Programs in Conservation, which is a long acronym. It's basically a conference for graduate programs in North America to give the opportunity to students to show their research or their treatments within an environment that is not too stressful. You're all with people from your own field, and you don't have the pressure of presenting in front of an audience that is maybe a bit more critical, because you're all among peers and your teachers are all there to help you and guide you. ANACPIC in 2023 was at Harvard Art Museum. And you can see on this picture, I was actually working on the talk I was giving. I was making paint. It was a beautiful project. And finally, another highlights would be being able to work on artworks starting in your first week in the program. So usually, from what I've heard from other programs in North America or in Europe, is that most programs will wait a semester or maybe a year before giving students the opportunity to work on artworks. But at Queen's, since you have 2 years, you get it done maybe on the first or even the second week. Obviously, you start with documentation, so you don't feel too anxious. They won't give you a swab and a scalpel and just say, go for it. They'll guide you through it. But I think that's the really advantage that Queen has. Advice for prospective students, look into the world of conservation to know what to expect. I had a beautiful library at Université Laval filled with books on conservation, and I read most of them just to know what it was about. I learned all my vocabulary in French, so I had to relearn in English, but it's really nice to know what to expect. And in the same vein, reaching out to conservators and their labs to get a feel of the environment. As Allison mentioned, also webinars or watching interviews of conservation, or back behind the scenes of museums. Most times conservation will also be there. I get the chance to visit a lab in Quebec City, and that's where I really got the go to Queen's, it's your best option. So that's where I am now. So next slide.
Okay, so hi again, I'm Jonah, and I'm representing the research stream. So the research stream is like the treatment stream, a 2-year program, but it is a lot less course-based and more research intensive. So we only take 4 courses during the length of the 2 years, 3 of which are you'll have sanctioned for you. So the microscopy course, the properties of materials, and then the instrumental methods of analysis, along with one elective course. And then for the rest of your time at Queen's, it'll be spent working on your master's thesis. So for the academic prerequisites, typically we require an honors bachelor's degree in the sciences or engineering with a minimum B+ average. I'm coming from Southern Ontario, so I have a 4-year undergraduate degree. 3 terms of chemistry at the university level, including at least 1 term of organic chemistry, all courses preferably with a lab component. And to make sure that you have a breadth of knowledge in the arts, we require a minimum of 2 full-year courses in art history, ethnology, archaeology, or equivalent. And then next slide. Okay, so like I said, I am a research student and I come from Hamilton, Ontario. So my undergrad was done at McMaster University. It was a BSc, and then afterwards I did an MA in classics. So during my undergrad, I sort of juggled the 2 disciplines, and then I wanted to have more of a formal education in classics afterwards. So I went for the MA. And then during my BSc in chemistry, I did a senior thesis in a lab working on the development of metal ion sensors for drinking water. And this research project was not conservation science related at all. So if you're coming from a STEM background and you're worried that, oh, I don't have any conservation science experience, what am I going to do? Don't worry about that. You'll be fine. So in terms of other pre-program experience, during my time in classics, I participated in the Villa de Tito archaeological project. So I was very fortunate in the sense that my undergrad university had a strong classics program, and one of the professors encouraged us to go on these archaeological digs that were set up by the school, and I was fortunate enough to be selected for one. And then in addition to my undergrad thesis, I also had 1 summer's worth of undergraduate research in a different lab, doing inorganic synthesis. And then I also did a work study as an assistant laboratory tech at the Mac Chem department, helping out with the night labs for the 1st-year lab component courses. Okay, so next slide. So my current research at Queen's is looking at metal ion migration and drying behavior in oil paint films. So basically, it's about seeing the ways in which different paints of different pigment concentrations interact with one another when they are applied in the same area. And currently, I'm working on my final experiments and finishing up my thesis document. I'm at the tail end of my thesis, so I'm hoping to finish strong at the end. And then for an internship, the internship is not required for the conservation science stream, but generally most students in conservation science end up doing one anyways, because it looks very good on a CV, and it's good to have more breadth of knowledge in disciplines that aren't related to your own thesis work. So I did mine at the Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec. Looking at archaeological science, I was working on rock art samples from Lesotho in Southern Africa, which was very cool. And like most students, treatment students, this was 3 months, so enough to work on a small project. And then my personal program highlights, I participated in an archaeological conservation short course at NYU. Again, I'm going to reiterate that my current research is in modern oil paints. So this was again outside of my scope of learning and the scope of my research, but it was still a good experience. And I learned a lot, definitely. And I also am presenting at the upcoming CAC conference, the Canadian Association for Conservation, their annual conference, which is in Victoria, BC this year. So if any of you happen to be attending that, you might see me there. And then there's also the fact that you get to make connections with people all over the world through the program. So the people in your cohort, there are going to be people from all sorts of different backgrounds, and it's fun to get to know them, plus the people, plus the faculty members. I was able to set up some international connections with through the professors here, which was very useful, and it's very cool to have. And I am also going to be taking on a graduate internship at the Getty Conservation Institute in LA this year. So the Getty Conservation Institute, they have a year-long internship program for treatment and science students. And it's part of a big initiative to foster education and to give people who are just out of graduate programs more practical experience. So I'm very fortunate. I know for a fact that I could not have done it without the help of the faculty here coaching me through the interview process. And for my advice for prospective students, it would be have an open mind and be willing to try things outside your comfort zone. So the experiences I've had, like the internship in Quebec and the short course, they're not related to my thesis work at all, but they sounded fun, so I went for it. And it is always good to have on a CV that you know more than one thing that you're doing in the lab. So go out there into the world and don't be afraid to ask the professors or your peers or whatever connections you have about any opportunities for stuff outside of the lab or classroom. Okay, so next slide. And then we have this section about international students. So I myself am not an international student, but just so for those of you here who might be, these are things you need to be aware of. So you need to have English language proficiency demonstrated. I'm not sure what the test is called, but this only applies if you're from a country that is not primarily English speaking, or if you did your bachelor's at an institution that did not have English as the primary language of instruction. And then there are also funding options for international students, and more information about that can be found on the Queen's Art Conservation webpage, along with funding options for domestic students as well. And then visa requirements. You're going to be studying here full time, so you will need a visa to enter the country. And more information about this can be found on the School of Graduate Studies website from Queen's University. And a work visa. So if you're coming in here again and you're going to be doing an internship, which is outside of the studying purview at Queen's University, you will need a separate visa for that, especially if you go to a different country. Okay, and next slide. Okay, so job opportunities. So I know for myself, when I was applying and I was first starting the program, this was one of my major anxieties, sort of just being filled with a sense of dread, like, oh, I'm not going to be able to find a job after graduation. If you're thinking that right now, get that out of your head. So our graduates are fortunate enough to have found employment in cultural heritage institutions around the world. So museums, galleries, archives, libraries, research institutes, and in private practice as well. We have a few graduates who have started their own businesses and are making a living off of that, which is very cool. And we have a global impact. So we have some students who choose to stay within Canada and make their living here, or we have people who want to branch off and explore the greater world of conservation. And of our most recent 92 graduates, at least 86 are working in the field, working directly in the field, so actively as conservators or conservation scientists. And we highly recommend that you visit conservators working in your region to know more about it, because the more network connections that you have, the better. And it's nice to hear from someone firsthand about how they found a job and made a living through conservation. Okay, so next slide.
Yes, so to continue on the job opportunities, including you have the internships in the treatment stream that is mandatory to 12 weeks, sorry, summer internships. And if you want to, you can also have an internship in the conservation science like Jonah did. So we are a cohort of like 22, I think, maybe less, maybe I'm including faculty. So we're a small group, but we all have summer internships locked in. A few of my classmates are going to the National Gallery of Art in Ottawa. There's Rebecca in paper, who's going to the Art Gallery of New South Wales in Australia. And this is building from connections with our beautiful paper teacher, Rosaline Hill. We also have archaeological excavations in Turkey, that's Caitlin's first year going in Turkey. And we have the, oh my God, Hirshhorn, I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, Hirshhorn Museum in Washington, DC. And as I mentioned, I'm currently in Minneapolis doing my second year summer internship. For fellowships and employments for recent graduates in the past 3 years, we have the Brooklyn Museum in New York City. We have the Maurits House in the Netherlands, the Hamilton Care Institute in Cambridge, and the Art Gallery of Ontario in Toronto. Next slide, please. Further resources. So for conservation, you have both CAC, which is the Canadian Association for Conservation of Cultural Property, and the AIC, which is the American Institute for Conservation, which are the main associations, I would say, in North America. There are more, but the main ones you will probably see if you're looking up on the internet on conservation. It's a big community and you can get involved. You can sign up. You can also sign up for free for AIC, because I'm signing up for free and I'm paying a student fee for CAC. What's really interesting about these two is that you can find conservators and reach out to them. AIC and CAC both have a gist list, which it's a bit like a forum or a blog where people post their questions. People can also post job offers, fellowships, or just general questions about materials. So you can get a feel of what the conservation world is like. And in the middle, you find Canadian Conservation Institute, or CCI, which is a wonderful resource for all that's related to preventive conservation, conservation treatment, conservation science. You will find many articles on taking care of objects. I know for a fact that CCI has a wonderful glossary in both English and French words for paintings vocabulary that was really useful to me. So I encourage you to go look and see on these websites what they have to offer. Also, Queen's University has a few resources for you. The first one will be the Art Conservation Program website, and I'm sure many of you have been there. There's also the School of Graduate Studies, the International Center, that are really good if you're an international student. And finally, you also have the Ben Ray Center. I know there's the Ben Ray House, which is like across our beautiful building that you can see on the picture, and they offer free soup. So that's really nice. It's like one of my highlights of my program that I did not mention, free soup every weekday. So, and you also have, it's not written, but further resources, you have your teachers who are always happy to help you, to support you. They know also their own, they have their own network, but they also have resources to guide you through your program. For those who weren't there at the beginning, Allison is our graduate coordinator. So she's like the main resource if you have issues in the program. Next slide.
So I wanted to say a big thank you to Jonah and to Rose for working on this with me. And I wanted just before we get to the question and answer period, we were hoping that by seeing all these different pictures throughout the presentation, you can get an idea of what the program is like. There's group work, there are discussions with the professors, there's individual work as well. So students learn how to use scientific equipment and work with scientists. You don't need to know everything right from the beginning. It's all about a learning experience. And you can see in the upper left, students working on a salvage workshop that we had. Below that is a gilding workshop. In the center, that's a yearly photograph that we always have. And then the upper right is a conference, and then work in the lab on the bottom right. Now, I'll also say, just because it was brought up, and I forgot to mention, that our students in our program have to choose which stream they're going into right when they apply and when they get accepted, so into a specific stream. So that's one difference from the other programs in North America, for example, in the US programs. And our program is 2 years because it's legislated by the government. In the third year, our students will have graduated, but then they go on to fellowships. And in the US, it's the same, where there is a fellowship in their third year, but then they graduate after the fellowship. So that's the big difference. Those are some of the big differences. And I believe in Europe, the 5-year program includes an undergraduate and a master's degree in that 5 years program. So just to give you a sort of overview of the different programs worldwide and how Queen's fits in. So I will, I think, turn it over now to Steph, who's going to be basically reading the Q&A. So please make use of the Q&A. If you write down your questions, Steph will read them, and then we'll all be able to answer them. You can also, if you want, email people, not email, but reach out to people, any of us, with individual questions, but I'm sure that many of your questions other people will be wanting to hear as well. So please do take the opportunity to ask us anything. So thanks.
Okay, so maybe while we're waiting on a question from one of our participants, something that I can go over, which is probably the most common question that I get from prospective students, is about our chemistry requirement. That seems to be what we get a lot of inquiries about. A lot of our students come from humanities background. We do get students from science and engineering, but I'd say the majority come from either humanities or fine art. And a lot of them suddenly realize that, they haven't taken chemistry since high school. That seems to be a big worry. So, we do understand that. Obviously, chemistry is a really big part of conservation, and it is very important. But if you are not from a chemistry background, we do understand that you might have a bigger learning curve when suddenly having to take 3 terms of chemistry in your last few years of undergrad, or maybe after you graduated. And we're obviously, we want you to do your best, but we realize that is sometimes a bit more difficult. So for the chemistry, yes, it's 3 terms, which is 3 courses, like 3 12-week classes, and they can be taken online. They can be taken at college or university, but you do have to have at least one of them with a lab component. And that usually tends to be the organic, but it doesn't have to be. Classes you've taken several years ago, say a lot of Quebec students took chemistry when they were in CEGEP, and then that does count. We will accept those. That's totally fine. Yeah, so any of that is good. It does just have to be a graded course. We do not accept a pass-fail course. You do have to be graded. I think that covers the chemistry component. Oh, here we go. So the first one is I'm an undergraduate chemistry 3rd-year student at Queen's. Wonderful. Okay. So I know that they're asking about what courses at Queen's that would be offered at the undergraduate level that would be useful. So I know at Queen's there is a technical art history course that Ron Spronk offers. I don't know if it's every year, but that obviously would be a great course to take to get an intro into conservation. Allison, I think you might know of a couple of others through art history, but you
Yeah,
know,
I
there's
think,
also
and
archaeological courses or classics courses that would also be great for that.
I think this past year, Antonia Behan also gave a class that had a focus on conservation, and Kathleen Henniger also has given classes. But you know, really, just to make sure to make it broad as well, we're interested. It doesn't need to be a conservation related course because that can be really difficult. It just depends on what expertise the professors have. So you don't need to have specific courses so long. You know, basically, what are we interested in? You're interested in materials, in the more humanities end as well, to understand like the context of the objects. But there is no we don't really consider like you don't have to take specific courses because we have to make it general because we have people coming into the program from around the world. So I guess Clara, sorry, we have certainly those are some examples at Queen's, but you know, in different, you don't need to come to Queen's, you don't need to go to a program with a conservation faculty either. So it's just really the basic understanding of these different courses from different areas. The next question is about people applying for external funding, such as OGS, NSERC, and SSHRC. And so we definitely have students who get these awards, NSERCs and SSHRCs, and OGS as well. And so we work with students in September, October, November for the NSERC and SSHRCs, and we read the applications. This year, I think we have 2 SSHRCs and 1 NSERC, considering that we have a class cohort of about 9. We have OGS winners as well. So we sometimes have 3 of these awards as well from the Thai Council, or 3 or 4. So I think it does vary year to year, but we have had good success with it. And we do work with students in the fall term to make sure that they have the best chance. There are different workshops that art history holds as well, and also the graduate school also holds workshops. So I think altogether there are many ways that we try and work so that students are successful. So Steph, do you want to talk about the credits and artistic background?
So there's a question from a Quebec student asking about credits needed in artistic classes, so studio art, and if you need a portfolio. So we don't look at credits. We look at the class itself. You know, what a credit means at your school could be completely different at many other schools. So it's not a universal measurement in academia. So it doesn't matter how many credits you have. It's if you took a 12-week course or a full year course, or what you've taken, the course itself. So for artistic classes, meaning the studio art or workshop classes, so hands-on fine art classes, you need to have 2 12-week terms of that. And that's if you take it at a university. We will also accept as equivalent classes taken at a local art school, or workshops taken in a private studio or a museum or gallery. You would just need to complete roughly equivalent number of hours as you would in a proper class at school. This is, you know, because there are many ways to get studio art experience, and especially if you're able to take several different things in smaller classes outside of university, you're exposing yourself to a lot more experiences. For the portfolio, when you apply, you don't need to have a portfolio with your application, but if you are asked to interview for us, then you do need to submit our portfolio. And having those studio art classes and having examples of works of art that you've created is really great for your portfolio, really help to fill it out. If you have conservation experience and are able to include that in a portfolio, that's great. But if you don't, then that's fine. And this is where you can use your studio art experience.
So I see the next question is discussing our exciting new Bader Chair position. So a new professor, a new stream. Dr. Erin Sugar from the Buffalo program is joining us. And this July, we're extremely excited. It will mean a second scientist on the in the professor group. So we're really excited about it. And so he is the Bader Chair looking at imaging science. He has a lot of other areas of expertise like archaeological chemistry. And he is going to be focusing on imaging techniques like the scanning XRF M6 that you'll learn about, that will give you elemental information, but in a map formation, which is really exciting. And our students get to use the equipment. And like Jonah has actually used the equipment. Rose, I don't know if you have, but your classmates have, and so you get to see the results from that. So Dr. Erin Sugar will be using that, the VSC, at other types of equipment, and he's going to be a very exciting time, I think, to have this new capability and new opportunities for students to look at their objects that they're doing treatments with, using these techniques, and do also more extended research projects. So we're very much excited about that. I think the first year, Dr. Sugar won't be actually teaching classes because he'll be applying for grants, but he will in future years. So it's a very, very exciting time. I see the next question is about whether doing an internship prior to applying is helpful, and how to get the internships. I'll just say, in different locations around the world, it's more or less easy to get internships. And in the States, there's a real, there is a whole pre-program experience. We don't require pre-program experience, so we know that it's challenging to get that in Canada. And we always say that if it's possible to even visit or meet conservators, it's really important. But I'll hand it over to Steph just to talk a little bit more about that.
As Allison was saying, we don't require you to have an internship experience or conservation experience when you apply. Obviously, it's going to help your application if you do, but it's not necessary, and we quite often do take students who don't have hands-on experience. But what they will do is they will, as Rosa said, is read all about conservation and look at the professional websites, attend professional webinars, or read journal articles, like really look into what conservation is. So you maybe not have actual experience, but you've given yourself a really good understanding of the field and what we do, which you can talk about in your interview, and you can really lets us know that how interested you are and that you're dedicated to it. So that can be really helpful. Also, has been said, being able to tour a conservation lab, again, easier in some places than others. You just have to try. And sometimes it works, or getting to talk to professionals, people in the industry, joining the Emerging Conservators program that's available, and the mentorship program. These are all ways that you can get experience if you don't actually have a specific internship.
I think, Steph, maybe you could also address the question about portfolio that you do need to have for your interview? Maybe.
Yeah,
Steph, can you
yeah, I
talk a
did
little bit
touch
about
on
that?
that before. So yeah, you do need to have it for the interview. You don't have to have it when you apply, so it's not part of your application. But you should hopefully have some idea of what you have for a portfolio or have something put together. So if you are asked to interview, you have something ready. When we do send out the request for interview, we do give you a couple of weeks notice. So it's not like we're going to ask you to come in or interview like in 2 days. So you do have some time, but a lot of people are also in their last year of school at the same time. And so free time is definitely limited. So if you have something already put together, that'll help you, but it is not necessary as a part of the application. It's part of the interview afterwards. Okay, so and there's a question from an international student wondering if a 4-year bachelor degree in language, but I take classes in chemistry, art history, and ethnology. Yes, so we require an honors degree in art history or equivalent. And an or equivalent can mean a lot of the humanities, which includes languages. And the fact that you've taken some art history courses in chemistry and ethnology, that is a great, well-rounded amount of classes. So that would qualify you for those prerequisites. So that would be great. You would still need to take the studio art. So it doesn't show that you have that. So that's the only other prerequisite you would need. We have a 3rd-year art history student asking that they're not allowed as an art history student to take studio courses. So this kind of thing is actually very common, especially with the chemistry and art history. So a lot of students coming from the sciences aren't allowed to take studio art courses. A lot of art history and fine art students aren't allowed to take chemistry courses. And that's difficult. So sometimes students need to take those courses in another year after graduating. You can take them over the summer. This is why we do accept the chemistry courses as an online. Even Queen's offers online chemistry, although none of them have a lab component. So you still would need to make sure that you found an online course with a lab component. But as I said, you can take studio courses at a local art school, at a gallery, a museum, or workshop, and then just provide proof of that in your application, usually in the form of, you could get a certificate of completion from the instructor. Sometimes they'll give you a letter if you request it, saying that you completed so many hours in such and such course, because these kinds of studio art courses, they don't offer transcripts, but we will take those other forms to show that you have taken it, and you'll be able to show that in your portfolio as well. I don't know if Rose or Jonah had to take courses, prerequisites outside of their actual program, or if they were able to incorporate them into their undergrad program.
I used up all of my elective courses for that.
There you go.
I learned I wanted to go into conservation really late in undergrad, so I had to take an additional year. And it was weird. I added all my classes at the tail end of my baccalaureate art history, but it didn't count as part of my baccalaureate, but it was still on my transcript. So that's like the kind of trick I found to get it on my transcript and submit it to Queen's without having it counted in my bachelor. So that's what I did. It was also during COVID, so maybe people were more lenient about my situation than others, but that's what I did.
Great. So we have a follow-up question from before. also on internships. So this person is working in a synthetics lab this summer, and if that would still be good experience or need to have more specific internships in the field. Allison, do you want to?
Yeah. I think that's great experience to work in a
Yeah.
lab. We're really pleased when people have varied, you know, what you're learning in the lab, in a more mainstream lab, it will be really pertinent and helpful in the lab that we in our labs. And I know, Jonah, you worked in a chemistry lab before, and many of the scientists do for their undergrad project, fourth year project, or maybe in the summers. And no, it's just great experience for both the treatment stream and the science, the conservation science stream as well. So no, that sounds wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I mean,
we really
obviously,
do like, oh, sorry, Allison. I was just going to
no,
say
I was
that
going to,
we do like it when people come from different backgrounds and have different experiences. It really gives us a more well-rounded lab, and then the students can learn from each other as well.
and there's if you get the opportunity to work in a conservation related workplace, that's great, but it's not required because we know how hard it is to get that. Also, you'd get to learn whether or not you actually do want to be in this field, because I think that's something that's part of the reason why we want you to go and visit and talk to people. So, you know, it's a lot of work to get into the field and it's competitive. So we want you to know that this is something that you want as well, for sure, like by actual experiences.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question from Jacob, who has a great amount of experience and been working in conservation for the last few years. So you want to know if that would qualify you for the treatment stream. So you have a Bachelor of Honors in History, so you would have this art history or equivalent courses. Now, an advanced diploma in cultural heritage doesn't necessarily mean that you've had 3 terms of chemistry, or that you've had the studio art courses. So you still need to have all of our requirements and prerequisites. So you have amazing experience, so that's fabulous. But I'd have to take a look at your transcripts to see if the courses you took in your diploma in cultural heritage actually have the specific chemistry we need. And if you took studio art in your honors program, in your bachelor's. But you could follow up with me directly, and we can go into that into more detail with your specific education experience if you'd like. So someone has asked about recommending textbooks or journals to read. So that's not my field.
So I think that first of all, we know that it's maybe easiest right now to get things online. And so I would highly recommend looking at the Canadian Conservation Institute website. They have so much information that people from around the world use, and museums maybe who aren't specialized in conservation. So they have all different levels of information as well. And as we said already, the Canadian Association for Conservation, the American Institute for Conservation, they all have great websites. You could look at museums. They often have different, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, all the museums around the world have their websites are full of really great information. For more other kinds of journal articles, there are journals associated with the Canadian Association for Conservation, the Journal of the Journal of the Canadian Association for Conservation, and the AIC, the Journal of the American Institute for Conservation, Studies in Conservation. There are just many references. And actually, I don't know if Steph has a good link to that, but our librarian has put together a number of different resources that maybe Steph, I'll give you that link so that you can give it out to people if they inquire about that kind of thing. And maybe this person who's just written that, maybe you could write to Steph at that Art Conservation ArtCon web email address, and she would be able to give that to you.
Nice. So I just put the email address for the program and to contact myself for any specific follow-up questions you may have. And I think there's just 2 questions left in the chat right now. So one of them, someone has taken a lot of private art courses over the years, but not any specific accreditation. So we have made exceptions when someone has had like years and years of studio art courses throughout their teen years, but doesn't have any, as you said, accreditation. They sent in examples of their work, and we assessed it. And in that case said, yeah, this shows that you have, incredible hand skills and an understanding of the art. And yeah, and so we did make an exception in that case, but it's really on a person by person basis. And you would still need to send in an example of some of your work, and you can talk to me about that as well. If you're interested in pursuing that, that would be great. The last question, Allison.
So
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking, if you're asking about which stream might be appropriate for you, or.
I mean, we offer a master's degree. So if I'm not sure if you're wanting to do, I mean, you have a bachelor's degree, and I think it's maybe you can talk to us more specifically about what you're actually interested in doing. I mean, our programs really are for treatment students who want to learn to be treatment conservators, and then also the science to some extent where people are doing research in conservation science. So that's at the master's level. And then third, it's for people who don't have, who have conservation experience, but don't have what is required, at least in Canada and in many countries around the world, for doing actual treatment work. So maybe they learned to be conservators in another way, working with someone, for example, over many years. They have 5 years of experience, but they don't have and they want to have a master's degree to be able to work, for example, in for some opportunities in Canada or abroad. Those are the 3 kind of streams that we have. So maybe the person who's writing that could just write more to Steph, and we could see whether or not what you're interested in, if it's a good fit for our program. It would be great to talk to you more about that. So hope that answers some questions, but please do get in touch with Steph for more in-depth discussion about that. I think that's all the questions, and we want to thank you for coming. It was just great to have all of you here. So thank you very, very much for your interest in the program, and we really hope that we see applications from you. We hope that if people are early on, maybe in high school or early on in their undergraduate degree, please be in touch with us. If you're nearby, you can come and visit us. So yeah, please take advantage of any opportunities you might come by. And again, we're happy to continue discussions that we've started here. So thank you. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
The recording will be available. I think a few people have just come in. So just to let you know that we will have this recording available for you if you've missed the time for some reason. So we look forward to getting that information. So thank you very much for coming, everybody.